Outside, the city still slept. The sun had yet to rise, and only the dull orange glow of a street lamp spilled through the cracked window. A cold breeze drifted in through the loose frame, brushing against Jasmine's cheeks like the world reminding her she was still here, still waiting. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere a truck honked, reminding the world that another day had begun, even if nothing really changed. Inside a damp, narrow ground-floor apartment, 11-year-old Jasmine Morales was already awake, not because of an alarm, not because someone called her. She woke simply because that was what life had taught her to do. There was no clatter of breakfast being made, no smell of coffee, no soft voice asking if she needed help getting ready for school. The bed near the window was empty now, just the faint imprint where her mother used to lie before the ambulance came 3 nights ago. The apartment still smelled faintly of her perfume. Jasmine paused, staring at that spot for a moment, then looked away. There was no time to cry. Jasmine moved quietly from beneath her worn blanket, careful not to let the floorboards creak. She pulled on a faded t-shirt and tied her long hair into 2 loose braids with stretched-out rubber bands. Her sneakers were fraying at the heels, but they would do. She looked into the broken mirror and whispered, "You've got this," as if echoing the words her mother used to say long before illness took over. From her backpack, its straps torn, its color faded, she pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper. Her resume. Written by hand in pencil, each word chosen with care, each line proof that she had tried. She had written it the night before. No help, no corrections, just hope. She didn't know if what she was about to do was right, but she knew one thing for certain. She had to find someone who would listen. Not tomorrow. Today, the 34th floor of Westbrook & Co. gleamed in the cold light of 3 glowing screens. Daniel Westbrook was reviewing financial trends, international contracts, and a packed calendar. His dark gray suit fit like it had been sewn onto him, and his tie formed a perfect triangle beneath his chin. On his desk sat a coffee cup, cold, untouched. He didn't need caffeine. Control, order, and power were what kept him awake. A quiet knock broke the silence. "Mr. Westbrook," said his assistant, Sarah, peeking in, her voice uncertain. "There's a little girl in the lobby. She says she needs to see you." Daniel didn't look up. "Where are her parents?" "She says she came alone, and that it's very important." He sighed. He hated interruptions, especially the unplanned, illogical kind, and a lost child certainly wasn't on his agenda today. But before he could dismiss the situation, soft footsteps approached. Jasmine walked into the room. Her hair was braided into 2 neat plaits. A worn backpack rested on her shoulders. Her face was serious, not scared. No tears, no pleading. Just a calm, grown-up sort of focus. She stepped straight to his desk, unzipped her bag, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Good morning," she said. "I came to apply for a job." She placed the paper in front of him. "This is my resume." Daniel blinked. For a moment, he had no words. The paper was handwritten, slanted letters and uneven lines. It read, "I can mop floors, take care of sick people, tell stories, and I'm never late." He looked up. "Where's your mother?" "She's in the hospital," Jasmine answered without flinching. "And we don't have time. I need to work. Starting now." Daniel stared at the girl standing before him. Still, unshaken, not a trace of fear, just the kind of quiet certainty that stirred something deep inside. No one had ever walked into his office like that, and certainly not a child with a handwritten resume and a gaze that didn't waver. Then she said her name, Jasmine Morales, and something in him paused. That last name, Morales. He had known someone with that name once, a girl who offered him water during a scorching summer. Her name was Elena. "What's your mother's name?" he asked. "Elena Morales." Daniel rose from his chair. The name hit harder than he expected, so ordinary and yet unforgettable, a piece of his past, folded and buried beneath years of profit margins and corner offices. "Take me to her," he said. The ride to the public hospital was like stepping into a world Daniel had long abandoned. Faded walls, crowded halls, the sharp smell of cheap disinfectant, and an oppressive silence. Jasmine walked ahead like she knew every step. Daniel followed, each stride pulling him deeper into a past he'd tried to erase. They reached the last room in a dim corridor. There she was, Alina, frail, pale, breathing through a thin tube. It took Daniel a moment to see in this woman the same girl who once laughed freely on a crumbling apartment staircase. Jasmine quietly adjusted her mother's blanket, then she turned to Daniel, meeting his eyes with the same firmness she had in his office. "If you didn't believe me before, now you see it. But I didn't come here for pity. I came to work, to save my mom." Daniel stood frozen. In that room, it wasn't the cold or the silence that shook him. It was the quiet courage of a little girl who had just brought his name back to a place he thought he had buried for good. Daniel remained still at the doorway, his chest tight, as if he had stepped straight into a memory he wasn't ready to face. Elena, lying still on that hospital bed, had once been a rare softness in the harshness of his youth, and the girl standing by her side, Jasmine, was a living reminder of all he had left behind. "Why is she here?" he asked quietly, eyes never leaving the fragile woman. "Because this is the only place that'll treat her without money up front," Jasmine replied calmly. "But they don't have the right meds or machines. Some nights, I'm not sure if she's still breathing." She pulled out a crumpled paper from her backpack and handed it to Daniel. On it were the hospital's address, Elena's name, and a diagnosis: advanced stage lupus. "I don't know what to do," Jasmine said, steady, "but I thought maybe you would." Daniel looked down at the page. His fingers tightened around the edges. He had signed billion-dollar deals, ordered entire departments to pivot overnight, controlled rooms full of decision-makers. But no piece of paper had ever shaken him like this. He didn't hesitate. He made the call. "Prepare an ICU room at St. Gabriel. Get Dr. Marshall. I'm covering everything." Jasmine didn't speak, but for the first time something shifted in her eyes. Not joy, not relief. Just release, like a burden had finally moved an inch off her shoulders. Daniel glanced at her one last time before stepping out to arrange the transfer. But promises were spoken. But deep inside, he already knew. He couldn't walk away from these two, as if he had never stepped in. The hospital transfer happened faster than anyone expected. Daniel made one phone call, just one, and within the hour, the ICU at St. Gabriel was ready. The head doctor was briefed, and a private team stood waiting. Some whispered that the patient must be someone important, but Daniel offered no explanation. He simply said, "I'll take full responsibility." Jasmine sat next to her mother during the entire ride. Her small hand clutched Elena's pale fingers, refusing to let go. Her eyes never left her mother's face. Daniel rode up front, silent, but his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again and again. Not to supervise, but to make sure they were still there, real, alive, and not lost again. At the new hospital, the air was softer, the scent of antiseptic didn't burn. The doctors began treatment immediately. New machines replaced old tubes. A clean bed replaced the thin mattress from before. Jasmine stayed close. She didn't take off her backpack. She didn't ask questions. She just watched. Daniel waited outside the ICU, sitting quietly in the hallway where only the distant beep of monitors and the occasional voice on the intercom broke the silence. An hour passed. Then, Jasmine came out, a thin blanket over her shoulders, hair still braided though messy. She walked slowly toward him and sat beside him without a word. For a while, they just sat. No talking, no glancing at each other, just sharing the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. "My mom used to talk about you," Jasmine said eventually, eyes looking straight ahead. "Not a lot. But whenever I asked her, 'Is there anyone you trust?' she'd say, 'Yes, Daniel. 2 years older than me, but never made me feel small. We were poor, but he never once complained.'" Daniel turned slightly, eyes narrowing at memory. "She said you lived on the bottom floor. She sat on the balcony on the third. One day, you were so hungry you looked sick, and she gave you her only bowl of noodles. But you refused the whole thing. You said, "One day, I'll give back, twice as much, to someone else." Daniel exhaled. "I remember that day. It was hot as hell. She brought me water and split her food. She was just 14 then." Jasmine nodded. "She said you disappeared after that. But years later she saw your face in a newspaper. All dressed up, serious. But your eyes, she said they were still the same." She turned to him. "So I remembered your name." "I didn't come because you're rich," she said softly. "I came because my mom believed you wouldn't forget." Daniel stared ahead, the memories rising. Elena laughing on a stair rail, her gaze open and kind. "He was the first person kind to me who didn't want anything in return," he said. "Now it's your turn," Jasmine whispered. Daniel looked at her, and in the eyes of a 10-year-old, he saw something he hadn't felt in years. A pure belief in who he used to be. The next morning, Daniel returned to the hospital early. He brought coffee, a coloring book, and a small bag of pastries for Jasmine. No one had asked him to, he just wanted to. And every time he stepped into that room, the quiet inside him seemed to soften. That afternoon, Ms. Diane Carter, the hospital's social worker, approached Daniel in the hallway. She was composed, with sharp eyes that weren't unkind. She held a folder in one hand and a serious smile. "I've been following Elena and Jasmine's case closely. The mother's condition is still critical, and Jasmine has no other relatives." Daniel nodded. "I'm aware. So, I have to ask, if the worst happens, would you be willing to take temporary guardianship of the child?" The question wasn't loud, but it was heavy. Daniel fell silent, not because he was surprised. He had asked himself that question since the very first day Jasmine walked into his office. But hearing it out loud, from an official voice through an official folder, made it feel real. "I've never been a father," he said slowly. "I don't know if I'd be any good at it. But," he exhaled, eyes drifting toward the hospital room where Jasmine sat reading, "but I know I can't walk away." That night, Daniel sat alone in his expansive apartment, holding the folder Diane had given him. He read through each section. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear of responsibility, but because for the first time, he was about to sign something not for profit, not for power, but for something far greater, the choice to stay. Elena opened her eyes on a sunny morning. For the first time in weeks, her mind was clearer than foggy. No nurse had to shake her awake, no machine screamed, just Jasmine asleep at her bedside, her head resting on her mother's hand, like she was afraid to miss the moment. Daniel stood quietly at the doorway, watching it all like something sacred. He said nothing, only placed a small paper bag on the nearby chair. Inside were juice, a new book for Jasmine, and a few soft slices of bread. "Daniel, is that you? Why are you here?" Elena whispered, her voice rough. Daniel nodded. "I never planned to leave." In the days that followed, Elena recovered slowly but surely. She could sip soup, exchange short sentences with Jasmine, and even smile once in a while. One evening, as the three of them sat on the hospital's balcony, watching the sky fade to dusk, Daniel spoke softly. "I'd like to give you both a different place, something quieter, more open." Elena turned to him, didn't ask why, only held his gaze for a long time. "It's not charity," he added. "It's a way to begin again. If you're willing." That morning, Daniel took Jasmine and Elena to a small apartment in the north side of the city. It wasn't luxurious, it wasn't grand, but it was filled with sunlight, had 2 bedrooms, a tiny balcony with green potted plants. On the dining table sat a fruit basket and a handwritten note. "This is your space, a place to begin again." Elena stepped inside slowly, her eyes wide with quiet disbelief. "This is for us?" Daniel nodded. "Lease is under your name, rent's paid for a year." Elena glanced around, her fingers tightening on the back of a chair. "Why are you doing all this?" Daniel shrugged slightly. "Because I can, because I want to. And because I've never done anything that truly mattered before." Jasmine said nothing, but she moved through the apartment room by room, touching each door handle, staring out every window, like she was seeing what a real home looked like for the first time. Then she stopped at the dining table. "And can we eat dinner here tonight, like a family?" Elena looked at her, then at Daniel. "Of course," she smiled softly. "We'll do that." That evening, they had dinner together around a simple wooden table under the glow of warm light. Nothing fancy, just toast, warm soup, and a little fruit for dessert. But for Jasmine, it was the first meal in her life where she felt like she truly belonged. Daniel stayed quiet, but never stopped watching. Elena's cheeks held a hint of color. Jasmine giggled, leaning into her mother's arm like it was the safest place on earth. That scene, so quiet, so ordinary, tightened something gently inside Daniel's chest. After dinner, Jasmine pulled out her sketchbook. She colored in silence for a while, then held up the drawing. 3 people sitting around a table. A man in a button-down shirt, a woman with tied-back hair, and a little girl with braided pigtails. Above them, in crooked handwriting, were the words, "My family." Daniel looked at it, speechless. Elena noticed his stillness and gently touched his hand. "She's named something we were still too afraid to." Daniel smiled. A small smile, but so honest it nearly closed his throat. No one made any declarations, no one claimed new titles. But in that moment, bathed in warm light, surrounded by pencil marks and quiet trust, they all understood one truth. They were already a family, by the choice of the heart. Time began to slow, as if life itself wanted them to savor every bit of it. In that sunlit little apartment, 3 once-lost souls slowly found a rhythm of their own. Cozy dinners, afternoons spent watching cartoons, evenings where Daniel helped Jasmine with math homework while Elena read by the window. Daniel started coming home earlier. He knew Jasmine preferred cocoa over milk. He remembered the scent of Elena's perfume. He was still Daniel Westbrook, the man in corner offices and boardrooms. But inside these 4 modest walls, he became something else. Someone truly alive. One late night, after Jasmine had fallen asleep, Elena sat beside him on the balcony. Her fingers gently found his. "You know," she whispered, "this is the happiest time me and Jasmine have had since her father left." Daniel turned to her, quiet. "Some nights," she continued, "I lie awake wondering if all this is just temporary, that maybe, one day, you'll leave too, like the rest did." He didn't speak at once. He simply squeezed her hand, then said, "I'm not going anywhere. You two aren't a side story in my life. You're the next chapter." Elena looked at him. They held each other in silence, both gazing up at a sky filled with stars. A year later, on a soft May morning, Daniel proposed. Elena cried. She nodded without hesitation. Jasmine squealed in joy and wrapped her arms around both of them. They had a small wedding. Simple, quiet, no extravagance. Just the 3 of them, a few loved ones, and a vow made from the heart. Daniel was once a man isolated in success, had finally found a place to call home. Not in a high-rise penthouse, but in a little apartment with a woman who once reached out to him and a brave little girl who once went looking for a future, for her mother and for herself.